Greetings all and welcome to another Wu-Sabat Outformation class coming out of the UK. As it's been said, Lotus of Life Revisited Part 3, brought to you by All Eyes on Egypt, Midlands and the North. So welcome everybody and thank you Hara M. Habab Jadefrey Hatap as our facilitator for today's session. So welcome also to those joining us on Facebook Live. If you do want the full interactive experience, then join us on the Zoom platform using the link contained in the chat. We're not always monitoring the Facebook Live chat, so as I say, if you do want to ask questions, etc., then feel free to join us on Zoom. But if you're happy to stay on Facebook Live, then by all means feel free to do so. So I'm just going to run a quick poll just to make sure that you can hear us okay before we start the class in full. Okay. Sorry, can you still hear me okay? I just lost connection for a second.
I can hear you.
Okay, can you see the screen again?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so just launching a quick poll. Can you just check that you can hear me okay over the Om chant in the background? So can you hear me clearly in the Om chant over in the background? Check 1, check 2. Can you hear me clearly over the Om chant? If you just vote in the positive or the negative. Okay, depending on your device, you may need to swipe left or right in order to see the voting screen. I'm not sure if it just appears. Depends on what device you're on. It seems most can hear me okay, so let's move on then. So just doing the visuals then, same thing. Can you see the presentation screen clearly? Again, if you can vote in the positive or the negative. Again, some of you may need to swipe left or right on your device in order to get the correct screen showing. Get the screen up. Okay, give you a few more seconds just to answer that. Okay, seems everybody can. Right, okay. Okay, so we're just going to start off the class with a positive affirmation, just to help us connect with our ancestors, so we can have the best experience for today's session. I'm going to say in the Sabaic language, so those maybe unfamiliar with it, don't be too put off. It's us expressing our culture of Wu-Sabat, us as Sabaeans in this day and time. And so we're going to say that in the Sabaic language and then translate that into English for everybody's understanding. Abdoi Kaleh Tapaluat Wu Fakur Ame Kasam Un Empa Paut Anuki Jawef Pa Ashuk Empa Paut Wu Kale Ashuk Kawun Jawef Nea Anuki Kasam Un Empa Paut Wu Pa Paut Kawun Kasam Un Em Nea Anuki Wahu Ame Pa Paut Wu Pa Paut Kawun Wahu Ame Nea Nakuk Naju Ame Kasam Un Empa Paut Wu Khabub Ame Mushachas Un Nakuk Kadur Kawan Kale Pafef Nakuk Tayur Jawef Pa Paut Ame Wase Ame Dayarni Kawun Lake Bakoy Jawef Pa Paut Anuki abed bi nafashni. Pa paut kawun anuki. Pa paut kador nakuk kador. Pa paut amul nakuk amul. Okay, so we said begin all prayers and thinking as a part of the all expanding. And then we said, I'm in the divine love of the all expanding, and all divine love is in me. I am a part of the all expanding, and the all expanding is a part of me. I am one as the all expanding, and the all expanding is one as me. I can succeed as a part of the all expanding and fail as an individual person. I can be all that I want in the all expanding, as long as my want is to stay in the all expanding. I am never by myself. The all expanding is, I am. The all expanding can, I can. The all expanding does, I do. So that was Partak Yud, called the Affirmation. And as I say, it helps us to remember the fact that we are part of existence and help us to connect with our ancestors, without whom we would not be. Okay, so quick induction for those who are not familiar with the Zoom platform before. So if you need to adjust, you should have a menu options here on this toolbar. So if you need to adjust your audio settings at any point, then you can do so here on the left hand side. We also have the three buttons, so chat, raise your hand, and Q&A. So the chat facility, if you need to make comments in the chat, which are not questions, so select everyone. Some people, if they've got older version of Zoom, it might be slightly different. So just select the option where it goes to everybody, so the global option, and then post your message. So typically it could be just feedback, can't hear properly, whatever the case may be. You can put that as messages in the chat area. And then if you've got a question, it is an interactive session today. So although I'll maybe be doing a lot of talking, please feel free to ask questions. Do not sit there in ignorance. And that's what this session is for. Just happens to be focused on a specific topic for today's session. And that's just so that basically, because our doctrine is so wide ranging, obviously 360 degrees of knowledge under and above the sun, it just enables us to focus in a specific area. So you go away and learn something that you go away and research upon, rather than necessarily us going around the houses. So that's just really primarily why we focus it on a particular topic. But please ask questions. Obviously, it makes it better and clearer for you if you understand what's going on. Otherwise, there's no point in me being there. So raise your hand if you've got a question, is the first option. This is where you come in live and you ask the question direct. At appropriate time, I will say, is there any questions? And then if your hand is raised, then your name will be called. This message will appear on your screen. You need to unmute yourself and then you can ask your question as you feel. And if you've dialed in, then those options are slightly different. So *9 to raise your hand, and then *6 to unmute yourself once prompted. In both instances, you have the ability to mute yourself and unmute yourself at will. So we just ask you to stay muted once you've asked your question, as to not disturb the rest of the webinar or class today. The other way to ask a question, if you don't want to come through and speak live, is to put a written question in the Q&A by pressing the Q&A button, and then the facilitator, Harat M. Habab Jadefre Hatap, will ask that question to me on your behalf. Obviously, if that question has not been answered correctly or you've got a follow-up, then please feel free to use the same thread or where you put your question to ask a follow-up or give feedback in that regard. It's better, you don't have to, but it's better if you're asking a question from the doctrine, i.e. on page, but to give the reference or the page. That does help, but if you haven't got it, then fine. On that side of things. Okay, let's keep it moving then. So poll questions, sometimes we do interactive quizzes. There is one today, so at some point in the session we'll do that. And that's just a recap from part 2, the last session we had. Just a bit of fun, I wouldn't say fun, but more recapping, it's nothing serious. We're not recording those details. So I know sometimes people don't like to feel any embarrassment or shame, but if you don't interact, you're not going to get the best out of everything. It's entirely up to you. But yeah, it's a 10-question quiz. Just recapping, do your best guesses, and then we'll go through the answers together, just as a recap from part 2 of this session. So even if you wasn't here for part 2, or you haven't seen it on YouTube, just participate and use your best guess in the first instance. Okay, so a more detailed introduction of who we are, etc., is available in part 2 of this class, I think, and part 1. So I'm not going to go over it too much detail, but it's important that we understand who you're interacting with today. So we are United Sabians Worldwide. That's what we're more popularly known as, and we have a number of different All Eyes on Egypt outlets around the world delivering classes in various different forms. So this is the one based in the UK in the Midlands of the North, even if you don't live in the UK. Now, we were founded by a person who we affectionately refer to as the Master Teacher, called Dr. Malachi Z, ZK York, or the Dr.York Okran, born in Takoradi. It's a place in West Africa, coastal town, in 1945, June 26 to be specific. And he was born to the sacred feminine by name of Mary Abba Okran York, also known as Fatima Miriam, as you can see on the screen right there. So, as we've said, and it's important for this Lotus of Life class to understand, okay, you can have great people and great leaders, and this is what we're not necessarily to be striving to be as dynamic in that regard. I think we was talking about in the last class. Yes, we need to make our imprint in the world by doing something for others in order to graduate, one may say, from this particular school of life onto the next levels of existence. However, how we live our life and who we are, and one of the things that was arguably taken away from us, particularly if we were under these monotheistic religions, is removing the importance of our roots and understand our genetics. So very important to understand who a person's mother is, because clearly without that person we wouldn't be here, whether you've had a direct contact with the individual, whether the person was a good or bad person, whatever the case may be. The actual fact is that that's the closest thing that you understand to any kind of divinity, because without that union you would not be here. So without your mother being able to give birth to you, and that's why we say it, and then shaping you in the womb, hence the word imagination breaks down as image and nation. Yes, because you're literally, your mother is shaping you in the womb, and we are an expression, obviously, of the DNA which was gifted to us by our etheric ancestors that went on to form, obviously, our race and species as a planetary nation here on this planet. But understand who your mother is exceptionally important, and despite, I suppose, in terms of maybe, trans people or whatever who are advocating for their equal rights in a lot of society, some of the solutions oftentimes that are presented step on women's rights, almost in a sense, because they haven't had their opportunity for the world to correct itself to understand the greatness of the sacred feminine. So being in a patriarchal society, and as you'll maybe get a gist of some of that from this class and some facts from that on this class, obviously the world is transforming itself from patriarchal to matriarchal, and I suppose in the lack of understanding sometimes in some of these discussions that are taking place around gender and sex, etc., some of the solutions proposed actually step on women's rights in that regard. So we have to be much more clever and intelligent about the way we apply solutions, because the actual fact of the situation is that we all came from a African, black female. Those are the facts of what we understand this planet. The oldest bones that have been found, let's say, have all been found on the mother continent of Afafre or Africa. So the reality is that we come from that reality. All human beings come from that reality in the first instance, even if some have taken plans and genetics and then used them for their own purposes to create other sub-races or man-made races, etc. It's all coming from the same source and gene pool. So that respect has to be acknowledged if we're all as human beings acknowledging who and what we actually are. Anything else, for example, whilst we respect people's right to believe what they want to believe, obviously in the modern era and in this day and time, many of those religions are outdated for the era that we're living in, because science has well proven that those things are factually incorrect. You understand? Woman did not come from the rib of a man. You understand? So the lesser cannot give birth to the greater, as we've expressed in this class many times before. That X chromosome is superior, in context at least of us being males and females, to the Y chromosome. The Y chromosome is 5 times less in size, has 2.8% less genetic material than the X chromosome. It's a defective X. So until we start to acknowledge that point yet, and there hasn't really been enough time to even be acknowledging those facts first, and acknowledging the fact that genetically, if you want to carry on your lineage or your lineage, that you must have a daughter to carry on your line because of the power of something called mitochondrial DNA, which is basically the battery of all cellular life here on Earth. Do you understand? Originated from the woman. And as I say, we've said this many times before, nature does not create the mobile phone first. Do you understand? It has to think about, well, how is the mobile phone going to be powered? Do you understand? So it's going to create the environment, it's going to create the charge, the power source, and its mechanism for charging before it creates the phone. Do you understand? So this idea in monotheistic religion that the man was first is the argument basically that the phone was created before the charger, before all of the materials that make up the environment to provide the power. Because the issue is, how was this individual, the man, going to survive? He had to be fed off of something. He had to be connected to a power source in order to survive. That power source is his umbilical cord. Yeah, so if, as Master Teacher cleverly expressed, yes, if man is created in the image and likeness of God, then yes, and then every man born thereafter, or Adam, let's say, is in the image and after likeness of God, and every man thereafter is created in the image and likeness of Adam, according to all the different monotheistic religions, the 3 major ones: Mosism or Judaism, Christism or Christianity, Islamism or Mohammedism, as it's called because of the 3 principal characters in those degrees. Then if that's the case, then the question is, who was Adam's umbilical cord connected to? Because a person has a navel, and Adam had a navel. Every man's got a navel. Let me say that correctly. Every man has a navel. So if we're all created in the image and after the likeness of Adam, and Adam had a navel, then the question is, who was Adam's navel connected to? Because we only get a navel from having an umbilical cord, which was obviously connected to someone. Yeah, not something, but it was connected to someone. Yeah, and then the question then, which people don't want to ask, well then, who was God's umbilical cord connected to also? You understand? So the fact of the matter is that they're asking you to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. This is the day and time where this particular lady you see on the screen is arguably one of the most important, if not the most important, sacred feminine born in the last 6,000 years, because in this day and time, all false information must perish, and actual facts obviously must reign. The new spirituality is factual information. Understood? Enabling us, at least as a people, to come together and unify mentally, in a sense, under those actual facts, and then the physical unity will then follow thereafter, because the mind has to be corrected first. We have been brain dirtied, particularly in the West, permeating now to Africa, which has unfortunately been invaded in a way where it's forgotten many of its ancient sciences, ancient cultural ways, not in all instances, but many instances. So it can't provide the same guidance as it once did for the world. So our ancestors obviously have to send people into the world to correct that and bring it back to its original, or bring us back to our original teachings and spiritual ways, which connected us in to the universe, on into the multiverses, on into the omniverse, and Papa Orders as part of existence. So Mary Abbot of Cranyork is not only important for us to understand who the master teacher is, but you understanding your mother is understanding who you are, which ties then into your 4 generational or your 30 ancestors, which you just happen to be at the head of the pyramid. Understood? Yeah, but all particularly have an influence on the person who you are, who you see yourself as, or who you are in terms of your characteristics, personality, so on and so forth. So Mary Abbot of Cranyork, she was the clan mother, as us moving back to a matriarchal tribe. And then, as I say, when she transitioned through the mitochondrial DNA, her daughter, Kimamtat Mokpataret Atum Reye, was appointed then as the clan mother. Still remains that to this day currently. Yeah, so our systems of culture, how we impart wisdom on the masses, etc., even rulership, etc., all based on natural nature design, or natural design in this regard. Yeah, so you see her there in the clan mother attire. And as we expressed in the previous part, you see the lotus flower there, which is a symbol of the female, but also a symbol of regeneration. You see that's now showing you that in reintroducing that back into the culture. Now the lotus of life is describing 9 different, I suppose, principles of the female genitalia in that regard. But it's also a symbol of, the woman is a symbol of regeneration, and hence why the female is connected to the lotus flower, which we see, as I say, different colors associated with different cultures around the world. But it was prevalent for us in ancient Egypt. And interesting enough, you see her on these sort of sacred colors here of the white, the red, and the black. You understand? You see obviously gold in there as well, clearly. But those colors again are interesting also for our people. You see them, for example, in the Dogon tribe in Mali, who are descendants of us as the pre-dynastic ancient Egyptians. So you see these colors within our culture having, as I say, some significance. So it's interesting that you see them there, even in here, represented in this design. Now, so his father, or sacred masculine, was Al-Hadi Abdul Rahman Al-Mahdi from the Dongola tribe in Sudan, again connecting us directly to the Kadem Mukamatu, or ancient Egyptians. As he was born 1922, again from a very prominent family in ancient Africa, Sayyid family there, as you can see on the screen, and his grandfather was known as the Mahdi. As I say, I think we're talking about that in a previous session, where the film June has got the sort of principal character. They're referring to him as the Mahdi, is liberating, I think, a group of people, nomadic people in that movie, which was the first part, but they're referring to this special individual as the Mahdi. Well, in our story, the Mahdi has already come as the guide, and then in that degree of Islam, 100 years after the Mahdi comes, is supposed to be the birth of al-Mujaddid, or the reformer. Understood? And so that reformer was a title which was given to Sayyid Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi, as reforming these various different schools or early degrees in terms of those religions, bringing them to at least a level of truth. So truth is different from fact. So fact of the matter, something can be true according to the Bible, or it can be true according to the confines of the Quran, for example. So it is true, for example, that the first 5 books in the Bible are called the Torah. However, the characters within the Torah, you do they exist outside of the written word of the author of that book? No, certainly it's not been proven to date. They haven't found a Garden of Eden, they haven't found Noah's Ark, there's no character, for example, that they found the bones of called Moses. You understand? But you can find copies of stories in older cultures, but that doesn't make it factual. You understand? So those religions have yet to prove themselves as actual fact, but that you can have truth, and so reforming those religions to make them useful for a people is something that the reformer al-Mujaddid did. But he was preceded by the guide al-Mahdi. And so this lineage or line is very powerful on that side of things. Not to get too deep, that also ties back into ancient Egypt, because if you look at even who they refer to as the Prophet Muhammad, now all this stuff is not, it's on the Anunnaki side, you could argue, of our culture, so to speak, you understand, or our story more so than our culture, but our story. If it is, the Prophet's name was Mustafa Muhammad Al-Amin. That Al-Amin is simply the Arabic way of saying the Amun, and it ties back into Amun Roye, one of our ancestors, who obviously all religions end their prayers in the name Amun. That you find in the Revelations chapter 3, verse 16. Do you understand? 3:15, yeah, 3:16. You understand? So in there, when they talk about the Amun, you understand? So the fact of the matter is that even then, it's still tying back. All roads basically lead to ancient Egypt, which is in Africa, despite many efforts to give you the impression that it isn't, or that black people are not the original ancient Egyptians. That's who we are. On those walls, there's many things that depict that, despite what the historian world maybe tries to do in terms of separating them to tie themselves in, or tie Europeans or European-looking individuals into the vine, and to obviously circumvent our greatness. But the reality of the situation is that is part of who and what we are, but it ties back into the Sands people of South Africa, which, as I say, all human beings come from, and we migrated from that point first, understood, with various different extraterrestrial ancestry intercepting our genes at certain points and upgrading us, as well as giving us different aspects of our culture to live by, so that it would aid our ascension journey in us becoming them at a certain point in our growth and future, as our DNA evolved within the environment. So clearly, the ways in which our ancestors, the Panatharas, they were referred to as the Egyptians, which means overseers, taught or renew our story, having obviously had our genes intercepted, particularly in the last 6,000 years, but the last 400 years, 400 years ago, with the so-called slave trade, although nothing was traded, our genes were intercepted, and physically and now mentally through the sort of media a hybrid was created called the Negro. Understand? So we went from Nwek Mokwanu, supreme beings, understood, to the Negro being created, which was a person that looked like a black person, however, thought like the Mokasu or the Caucasian. Do you understand? So this hybrid of a person was created, and so that's unnatural in nature for one race to emulate another race if that's not their nature. You understand? So we were playing, or it was a fake kind of human being that got created, obviously to have them, I suppose, use us for our labor, our energy, our soul, etc., to be the power source, I suppose, for the advancement of their society and their systems, etc., while at the same time, obviously, destroying any hope of who we were as divine entities or supreme beings, which, as I say, is for the benefit of everybody in that regard. So we was not fulfilling our responsibilities in terms of taking care of this planet. And so a solution, or a solution that's needed, but it applies to all races. All races get sent teachers, and the one that was sent to us from our ancestors, so we don't dig up bones out of the ground to find out who we are. Our story is informed from above. You understand? So our ancestors sending or birthing teachers or leaders into this world to come and recorrect that story, and that's done by way of a vessel or a being referred to by the ancient Egyptians as an Amun Nabab Raye Akhtar. Understood? And so, interestingly though, the ancient Egyptians referred to that being as Tahuti. Yeah, and actually, the part of that name, the Achach part of that name, which is dealing with the etheric side, is what ties into Tahuti when you look at it in the Safaf or the hieroglyphs, as some refer to them as. You understand? So that's a vehicle or a vessel that allows our ancestors to speak through in order to us to convey information. So there's, if you imagine it, as I say, I've drawn it sort of before on the screen, I'll do it now, just for time's sake. But if you imagine it like an hourglass, so you've got many ancestors who have existed prior and have pertinent information that would help us to understand who we are and our place within existence, coming into the center, yes, and this middle being, this Amanubi Reakata, and then that being is then spreading everything back out to influence the masses. Understood? And so I think in Malachi in the fourth chapter, and in the second Malachi chapter 4, basically in the fourth chapter, it is referring to the Son of Righteousness. Do you understand? The difference is when you look at, so if you was to pull up an image, for example, of sorry, the names, the pronunciation's gone for me for a second. But if you put up a depiction basically of the sun hitting the pharaoh, let me just see if I can do that for you in 1 second. This is to explain to everybody what I'm talking about. Just bear me one moment. Bear with me 1 second, it's just slow. Right, okay. So when we look at, I'm just going to switch the screen, just bear with me 1 second. So if you look at the screen, Anak or Ankh en Atun, just confirm that you can see the screen, Harat and Habab, for me, please.
Yes, I can see the screen.
Okay, so when we talk about, you can see here in this image, this is one picture of Ankh en Atun, for example, yeah, who they call Ankhanat, or Anach en Atun, yeah. Let me see if I can get a better image. Right, okay, so if we look here, we can see that, as we're expressing, that the sun here, or as it's depicted, a rayé, is sending out messages, understood, out through the actual rayés, yeah, or the rays of the sun. And in some instances, you can see an ankh on the end. In other instances, you see it's just the actual hand being shown. So the point being is that when you look at an hourglass, you see that, as I say, at the top, you kind of got this upside down pyramid shape. So if you imagine many ancestors who have knowledge about our existence and have interacted in terms of our existence, some who were on Earth, some not on Earth, who have useful information to show us, as I say, or remind us how we came about, where we came from, certain events or key events that took place in our story, to provide clarification and actual facts of how it actually went, not necessarily how it's been recorded or interpreted by maybe modern day researchers and different things of that nature. Yeah, so they're giving this being access to this knowledge and information, and that's coming through that central point or that sun, yeah, and then coming back out to the people in terms of that information. So you'd refer to that as so you've got outformational ancestors informing our information present being. You understand? So here, this is what this purpose of this Amun Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, one of the purposes at least, of this being is to inform, yeah, the masses, because our form, yes, when we talked about that hybrid being, was altered or changed from its natural state. Yeah, we went from a who to a what because of those circumstances which have then permeated the world of what this Negro hybrid should be, without the access to the ancient knowledge of who we are, according to just one of the records that we record on the walls of ancient Egypt. Do you understand? So we've deviated away from what we were, and so there's solutions in place to come and correct that. So if you imagine in that hourglass figure, there's above, the center, and then comes back out, isn't it, in terms of the opposite direction to the masses. You understand? But it's the same pyramidal shape in that regard. Understood? So that's how it works. Outformation into information. And the science of Wu-Sabat, which is a spiritual science that you're listening to today, its purpose is to transform information into outformation. But in order to transform information into outformation, you have to use outformation in order to do that. We had to use something that was outside of the status quo. Understood? Yeah, because when you're in it, and when we were a part of it, we couldn't see the errors and the mistakes, etc. Understood? So a person has to be born with a different mindset, a new mindset in this time. So the Wu-Sabat as our spiritual doctrine has not been altered. but the message that is taught has to be tailored. The message, or the balag, yeah, the message that has to be taught in this day and time must be tailored for the people of that day and time, because although we are our ancestors, we're not the same. We've got different characteristics now. The genes have tumbled forward, and so through those experiences, we're not exactly this. We are the same people genetically, but we're not the same people in terms of our experiences, and so we have a different mindset, and that has to be tailored accordingly. So in this regard, then, as I say, a combination was needed. The physical being in this context here, you're seeing the master teacher at age 25, Isa al-Hadi al-Mahdi, and the etheric entity at least was known as El Khadir, responsible obviously for the teaching, etc. In that regard, as it was known. Sure. Just confirming you're back on the presentation screen, not on Google. Right, and Habab.
Yes, we are.
Toltec. So, and then, as I say, once the religious schools had been dealt with, and the Devil's Rule ended, 9th of September 1999, and we were now ready to step in, as they refer to it as a new millennium, but we're stepping into the last, or we were in the last of the 4 of the 6,000 year cycles, ready now to enter into the next 24,000 year cycle. Then a new combination was needed to teach us about who we are truly and prepare us, as I say, for our inevitable transformation. Then that combination was Dr. Malachi Z York and the Ifrit being known as Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn. Understood? And so now, in this day and time, having gone through, as I say, various different schools, because we've been brain dirtied, understood? But actually our brains needed to be washed of all the filth and the rubbish that was non-factual information that made us oftentimes feel lesser in this society. Our brains had to be washed of that information in order to be taught, or at least get some understanding of the real knowledge, and the real deal. And part of that basically required some boosting up of our egos. Do you understand? In terms of, and I think I've said this before, if you were thinking about a domestic violence unit of women, for example, and they came in a very downtrodden state to that refuge, if they were having sessions and to sort of boost them back, to get them over the trauma of being in that type of relationship, it's going to sound anti-men. Yeah, it's going to sound, if a person was listening to it, men of this, men of that, etc. It could sound anti-men until the people get to a point where their self-esteem or the trauma, you're not going to get over it, but you can rebuild the person back so they're more balanced. Maybe if they can be in a relationship again with another man who's not the person who they were with, for example, who caused them all this damage. So it's not sound anti-men, but that's part of the process of their healing and recovery. So the problem is that with us, whenever we go through or need to go through those discussions because of what's been done to our people and the way our genes have been tampered with and the cancer of the disease called racism, we can't even have that discussion, because the moment we have it, they're calling you black supremacist, they're black this, black that, etc. But yes, it is a necessary process to go through for us to get to a point where at least we're more balanced again. And the reality of the situation is you have to show who's responsible for the problems that we're in. And that doesn't mean that there's no evil black people or different people of color or whatever who are not negative, etc., don't have devilish traits, etc., and all this type of stuff. However, we do have to pin some of the source to understand how the problem occurred in the first place, in order to, as I say, rebalance ourselves and get back to who we are as opposed to what we became. And those discussions are very difficult to have because those in power certainly are intimidated by the come up. They perceive that our come up or our transformation from that hybrid Negro back into supreme beings again means that we would take vengeance on them for all of the stuff that's happened over the last 6,000 years and more acutely in the last 400 years. But anybody who really understands our nature is that's not our mentality. Do you understand? So we have a statement that says no one wins the race in racism, yeah, because we're not into wrong racism. Wrong racism is a suppression of a race, another race to further your own race. We are, however, into right racism, which is racial pride, you understand, or planetary nation pride, you understand, being proud of who we are. And if others express that themselves, there's no issue with us in that regard, as long as it's, but you can see it's problematic, isn't it? If your racial pride is boosting somebody who killed, 100,000 black people, trading them, then we're not going to, obviously, we can't get you with that ancestor. If they want to build up, like in England, they want to build up Winston Churchill, but I know he was a racist. I could respect him for certain aspects. Yes, he was a prime minister. Yes, he may have been a leader in very difficult circumstances, whatever. I can respect that, but I don't have to embrace him as a human being if he didn't like me. So you respect who respects you. Do you understand? Same with Mahatma Gandhi. I can respect Mahatma Gandhi's wisdom, etc., and the fact that he was for his people. You understand? But he was a racist. So, and the wrong type of racist. You understand? In terms of wrong racism. Right racism, don't have an issue. But wrong racism is problematic for us. So I can still respect you. I can still look at your words, etc. But I understand that you were for your people. You wasn't for me per se. That's how I may look at that situation. So as long as everybody understands that, then we can get along. So if people respect us and they respect and accept and acknowledge our culture, then we consider them as part of the family. You understand? But we're not going from a place of ignorance by ignoring obvious things, like somebody saying, for example, I don't see color. Well, which is a stupid statement. You understand? Because colors in nature inform you about the nature of a being, or can inform, you understand, or are used in that way. Same way we use colors as a form of symbols in different aspects within our society. Do you understand? Whether something's on, whether it's off, we use colors. Yeah, if you're at a set of traffic lights, we use colors to indicate or give messages. Do you understand? So the fact of a person's color is giving a certain message or indication in nature as to their nature. So somebody can say, so they need to clarify that, because they need to just say, well, I don't judge people by the color of their skin. Is different to saying I don't see color. You understand? Which is stupid. You understand? Because the ignoring of color is certainly one of the problems that's affected, or respecting of color is one of the problems of the human race. They don't want to respect melanated beings. Understood? Because you're not melanated. Yeah, but we accepted non-melanated beings, even though we were melanated, and all the crap they used to say about us, and still say, even in some minds, about us and our hair texture and different things that came along with it. When it appeared that other than that was superior, everybody was happy with it, and we were told to be quiet and, do you understand? Be happy that we're in the West and benefiting from the crumbs that this society had to offer. You understand? Now, obviously, science every day is turning that around, and many of the teachers you see on the screen have made it their life's work to turn that perception around. And in the case of Dr. Malachi York Okran, making sure that it was factual. So we started off, the religious was simply a cloak that was worn to make sure that our people got interested, because we wanted to worship at a certain time to get us to a point where we'll be ready to accept actual facts. You understand? So our mindset had to be almost upgraded in a way, cleaned to a point where we'll be interested in thinking about those ancient Africans, who they were, and even connecting them to us. So you see in many societies the negativity that's placed upon Africa, because they don't want you to reconnect back to that source of information, even though they spend billions, if not trillions, have been spent studying that region, studying the culture of ancient Egypt, and they give a portion of what they've found, or appear to have found, to the world. You understand? All things basically which don't belong to them, but they want to claim as their own, which is your genetic and divine right, because you are them, you are their children. And so actual fact cannot be disputed in that regard. And all of that, as I say, starts with the feminine or sacred feminine genetics and DNA. So let's get into what we're talking about today. Longish but shortish introduction. Any questions? Any questions? Hara M. Habab.
No questions.
Okay, so if I remember correctly, I think we had got past the point of talking to you about the 24,000 year cycles, if memory serves me correctly. I think, yeah, we've gone past 24,000 year cycles and the rules pertaining to death and things of that nature, so that you could understand, I suppose, the real type of ascension journey that we were on. Just excuse me, trying to get back to where we were. So yeah, so these basically cycles that we went through, I think we'd finished off that section, I believe, in the last class. Yeah, so we'll jump into this section here. What I'm doing, yeah, might be a good time actually to do that recap quiz quickly. Let's see what I've got that. Okay, so I'm going to launch this quiz, and then we'll go through the answers together. If you're on Facebook, I don't think you can see the quiz directly on the screen. Yeah, I don't think you can see so I'd have to verbally sort of say the questions while people are filling in. So I'm not going to spend long on this. I'll give you 10 minutes to go through and complete 11 questions. Yeah, so you should see that on your screen now. Yeah, it shouldn't take long. Just your best guesses. In order to get your result back out, you need to complete all 11 questions. So do your best guess. If you just completely stumbled and stuck, especially with missing word questions, then just put a letter or something in the actual blank spaces and then move on to the next question. So I'll give you 10 minutes. It's 13 minutes past 2 over in England, so 30 minutes past the hour. So I'll give you to 23 minutes past the hour, and then we'll go through the answers together. Yeah, so a short break or silence while you complete those. Right, okay, that's 10 minutes. So just for time purposes, if you are, just please wrap up your quiz if you're able to. I'm going to go through the answers now. So ending the poll now. So if you need to click submit, do so. Okay, right, so let's just see. Okay, so I'm not sure if people can see the screen, but it should be showing. In fact, let me check what it's showing. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll go through the questions and the answers, and I'll display all the answers at the end. Probably the better way to do it. So the first question was, complete the missing words in this statement, and it was, understand that this universe is composed of blank harmonic tones or worlds. Yeah, so the answer, or the correct answer there, would have been 8. Yeah, so this universe, or when a universe is created, yes, 8 harmonic tones are created. You understand? So if you think about the tones within an octave, yeah, those tones that get created, you know, those do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Yeah, each one of those harmonic tones is equivalent to 8 different worlds. And so the point that we was making was that there are a number of different forms of existence occupying the same space, but they're not resonating on the same frequency. And so human beings are wired into a certain aspect of the electromagnetic frequency range. So therefore, there are things that we can't see because they're outside of that range, or they're vibrating on a different dimensional frequency, but still occupying the same space. Yeah, so 8 harmonic tones or worlds equivalent get created as a result of that. So question 2 was, complete the missing words in this statement. So linked to this as well. Each harmonic world is composed of one word, blank, second word, blank. So the correct answer there then is, each harmonic world is composed of 8 dimensions. So universe gets created, or this universe gets created, 8 harmonic tones are created. So that is equivalent to 8 different worlds, yeah, all occupying the same space. Each one of those harmonic worlds then breaks down into 8 different dimensions. So we exist on one of those. You understand? Yeah. So this is what this was referring to. So the answer would have been 8 dimensions spelled out in word form, yeah, as opposed to writing 8 dimensions. Now, question 3 was, a normal human hearing range is between, and we've got a number of different answers here. So looking at this, it will be 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz is the correct answer. Yeah, 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, normal human hearing range. So elephants, for example, can hear below 20,000 hertz, and bats, for example, can hear above 20,000 hertz. So their perception of the world around them would be different to ours. Yeah, in fact, it would be potentially more enhanced, because they can hear things that we can't hear. Yeah, so the point is being made is, just because you can't see or hear it does not mean it doesn't exist. Yeah. Next question of a similar vein. The normal human being's visual range is between, yeah, and it's blank, and then a number of answers there, and it says note nm, so the answer is given in nm, which is nanometers, which is 1/1000th of a meter. Yeah, so here, since somebody's got the correct answer there, so 400 nanometers to 700 nanometers would be the normal visual range. So, and if you look on the electromagnetic spectrum, I think it was a diagram I think we showed in a previous session, that range in the electromagnetic is very, very small. So the reason you can't see television waves, for example, is because they happen to be larger than 700 nanometers. Yeah, the reason why you can't see X-rays, because they happen to be smaller than 400 nanometers. So measuring it from the tip of the peak of the wave to the next tip of the peak of the wave. So again, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Yeah, it just means that your senses are not sensitive enough to pick up those details. And part of that as well is because part of what's informed that wrongly, you understand, so has caused it to us to form a certain view of it, is bad information. So, because as a person thinketh, so it is. So our perception is informed by information. Do you understand? So if the information's bad, then our perception of the reality of where we're in is going to be bad around us. So so some people can hear beyond these ranges or pick up waves beyond these ranges, but the average person would not be able to do that. You'd have to be trained to do that. And certainly, so a Nagaru person having heavily melanated individual obviously vibrates across the whole of the spectrum, hence why we are black in tone. Do you understand? But one would have to be trained to pick up higher frequencies. And I say, because we've been sort of bundled in with what everybody else is, then that's how we're operating, as opposed to what potentially we could achieve. Now, question number 5 was a diagram. So I had a diagram. I don't know if this, it seems quite small on the screen here, if it's easy to see. But it said from left to right, left, middle, and right. So there was 3 small safaf or hieroglyphs on the screen, and it was asking what were the meanings of each one of these. So we had the kind of well, first one was the Ka'ah symbol. Yes. The middle one, sorry, was the Ka'ah symbol. The middle one was the Ba'ah symbol, and then the third one was the Achach symbol. Yeah, so basically, for English translation, spirit, soul, and Ifrik. You understand? So, yeah, answer there would have been Ka'ah, Ba'ah, and Achach out of the answers there. So, see if somebody got that correct. And interesting enough, the bird that's showing there for the Achach symbol, when we explained earlier about Amun, Nabab, Arayay, Achach Patah, when the Egyptians referred to that being as Tahuti, is because it had the Achach in there. So, interesting enough, they were only giving you part of the name of the being that they were referring to. Do you understand? Yeah, so it talks about Tahuti as the Achach, but his true name would be Amun Nabab Rayay Achachtar. And so the symbol of Tahuti is in the name or the hieroglyph or the safaf, we should rightly say, of Amun Nabab Rayay Achachtar. It's that vehicle or vessel that allows our ancestors to speak to us through that being. Now, number 6 was match the Sabaic word with its English definition. So we had, so basically there was 3 options: exoplasmic being, which was a spirit; creative expressional being, which was a soul; and etheric being. And you had to match the Sabaic word with its definition, understand, or vice versa, understand? So exoplasmic being, spirit, that would be Ka'ah in Sabaic; creative expressional being or soul, that would be Ba'ah in Sabaic; and then etheric being would be Achach in Sabaic. Yep, so that was a matching question there to get that particularly correct. I think everybody got that correct, actually. Anticipated. So it says, what next question 7 was, what was the definition of Tatmum, perfection? So we explored this in the last session, and the correct answer is a clean, pure, Akal mind. All your intentions, all your actions, your deeds are pure without personal reason or gain. Yes, so I think, I can't remember, it might have been the last session, I think we gave an example of it's quite a tough bar to achieve or reach, hence why you're given up to 24,000 times. No, not take, in fact, let me correct that. You've got 24,000 up to 24,000 times to achieve, obviously, a level of perfection in this life, in or realm or existence here on Earth. But then your journey after that is still you trying to achieve perfection. So here, I suppose the primary, other than not breaking any of the rules that may have you sent back here, is obviously to do something for other than self and kind, to make some kind of imprint in the world or impact on the world, doing something for self. It doesn't have to be some big thing. You don't have to be Nikola Tesla, for example, but you do have to do something, because I say, that benefits society, so to speak, in order to make it to that kind of next level. So achieving perfection is not just in this level of existence, it's throughout one's existence. And as you can see, that the bar is seemingly quite high. So somebody, for example, I'll give maybe a tough example of this. A mother's son, for example, gets murdered for knife crime, and then she goes and sets up an organization that deals with teenagers, for example, to prevent them from getting into youth violence, etc. Now, we would say that that's a positive thing, and of course it is a positive thing, but it's not perfect by this definition, because it breaches the fact that it's not pure without personal reason or gain. It's because the driver for it was the mum her son got murdered, and so her driver was maybe so that mothers don't experience the same pain she did. Do you understand? So yes, it's positive, but it doesn't fit this definition, because before your son got murdered, you didn't set up the organization to ensure that children per se, or youths per se, were not getting murdered. Do you understand? So in that instance, it's not pure without personal reason. It's still a positive act, but it's not pure. So you can see that invisibility of how you do things is what that definition achieves. So to get to that point, for example, for some, let's say, or for many, maybe take a number of experiences to where you can deliver actions that meet that definition. So you think about the sun, for example, as I say, it does its job with little or no acknowledgement from us here on Earth, who not only benefit from it, but have the mind to direct intentional energy back to the sun in terms of whatever prayers or thanks, etc., etc. And if we're honest, many don't even do that. You understand? The sun barely sort of features in our minds. We're so caught up in the day-to-day liberty that we don't remember to give thanks to the planet or to the trees or to, you understand, the physical things in and around us that are also living entities and beings. We certainly don't always give thanks in that regard. Some people do, but many don't. So reaching that bar is high, especially high for human beings, because we're so selfish. And so if you look in some of the older books, when it gives you the characteristics, you understand, about different extraterrestrials, and you read the one about human beings, the one of the characteristics were egotistical, or that's how we have seen, let's say, by other higher groups of extraterrestrials, that would be, as we're seen as egotistical and very selfish. But actually, when you look at how we live, you can see that we certainly fit that definition. And so I've gone away from the more primitive ways of living, where we were much more aligned, not saying much more aligned, we were aligned with natural nature. And so everything we did, even if we were making technological advancements, we did so with the knowledge that it must fit in, or certainly complement the natural rules. So question number 8 was, in Wu-Sabat, the following is true or false. So here, if a shakhas person, katul, kills or murders another life, be in the raham womb or after, that spirit will be attached to them in this haya life, except if killed in self-defense. So the question basically was that true or false? So if you kill a person or you murder somebody, be it in the womb or if it's after, the spirit's going to be attached to them, except if you kill in self-defense. So the correct answer to that is false. So irrespective of intention, you breached a rule, irrespective of whether you killed the person, as we might say in this society, justifiably so, or whether it was done, accidentally, or whether it was done out of hate. Do you understand? You've killed, so you've killed. You understand? This is why we gave the example that in some of the Supreme Mathematics series, I think Man from Planet Risk, it was saying that if these higher entities, let's say they manifested into this world, and you was to point a gun at them, these etheric beings, they'll rather let you kill them than them obviously defend themselves and kill you. Because as we were saying, all of these rules kick in, natural rules kick in, which then that you're then subject to. So you're trapped. So they're basically, well, kill me and then I can, do you understand? I can reincarnate in another body, you understand? Or something of that nature. Now, it's not always, I can't describe. If they've been sent in to do a particular mission, they can't afford to get killed. So as you remember, in ancient times, they would create clones. Yeah, so that if one got killed or you got sick from a certain ailment, they could take part from one clone and put it in you so that you could survive. If somebody got killed, then obviously the clone can be the main point person, etc., to carry on the mission. So if you've got something that needs particularly solving, you can't afford to get, as say, the soul caught up in these rules of death, as you would have it. You understand? So it's treated slightly different. For example, if you kill a child in the womb to murdering somebody, but every aspect of it comes with consequences. You understand? So it's not consequence free in that regard. I think as well in one update that Baba gave, he was explaining the fact that us as Native Americans, for example, when certain soldiers went to battle, they would have to perform, after those battles had taken place, they would have to perform certain rituals on these soldiers to seek to maybe detach that spirit of the person who they had killed in war or battle from that individual. Because, say, some of the consequences of that, not a baby in a womb, if they're killed, they're attached to parents, and even in some instances act like a guardian angel, as we explained before. Sometimes they can be reborn through another child that if you're in the same partnership and conceive again, they can come back through and be born in another child. But at the end of that, you would have to experience what it feels like to be rejected. You understand? So you may go through a cycle of being born in different forms so that you experience a rejection. But there's no judgment in that context with the baby in the womb. There's no judgment from the for that situation, but you still have to pay the consequences forward for those actions, so that your soul learns through that experience. But in a murder situation, it's slightly different. You understand? Those consequences are much harsher. And I say the spirit that's attached to that individual in that context is trying to take the person out. So they kill you, that spirit wants you now to experience what they are now in the spirit form, so they're trying to take your life. You understand? And certainly will act as an influencing factor to take your life, especially if you understand it was done in a way that was or they considered to be unjust, in that regard. So American Sniper was the film, I think, that the Master Teacher said to watch, and I won't spoil it for you, but watch that movie and look at the end. That is a situation where you're seeing spirits influence what took place in terms of how that movie ended. Okay, 9. Wu-Sabat, which of the following statements is true? So the options are: you are judged for your actions while alive. You'll be judged by your actions and your intentions while alive. You will be judged for violations of natural law, not man's law. And then the other answer was: you'll be judged. No, you are not judged. This is a monotheistic concept. So the correct answer there: you'll be judged by your actions and intentions while alive. And so if you think about that, that kind of matches up with the definition of perfection. Do you understand? So actions and intentions while alive. So you could pray every day, but if your intentions were not right, you understand? Meaning that you were sort of going in there for the wrong reasons, then your prayers, I suppose, would be for naught. I mean, prayers as a form of prayer or prayer system, remember, is like spiritual aerobics for us. And even old habits, in fact, it does explain, I think, in chapter 1, that when you go to the prayer, or you approach prayer and you go into the temple to pray, for example, you're supposed to go in there invisible. So not asking for anything, which is a sort of foreign concept to many people in that regard. So you go in there asking for nothing and saying you're praying to say thank you. You're not praying to request things. And even when we set up altars, for example, to communicate with our ancestors, that is not a prayer situation. So we don't worship our ancestors. We have conversations with them. And part of those conversations may be to fix things that we need assistance with in this life. So if it's for personal reasoning or gain, you're going to utilize your ancestors in your 30s. So your 4 generational ancestors, personal request, you have a conversation with them. You see how best they can assist and help you. But if it's for other than self, you understand? So it's to help other people, like, I don't know, you're trying to help children in Africa or something of that nature. I'm using an extreme example. Then you would utilize your Salafu to make the request, to the Natharu, so your etheric ancestors. They're interested in bigger picture, some might say, you understand? Or, governing the environment, taking care of nature, looking after the planet, so on and so forth. So you'd put a request for other than self that you were not directly benefiting from to your Panatharu, but you would use your ancestors, your blood relatives, to make that connection for you. So they are your router, in inverted comments, of how you would then connect to the right place within existence. You understand? When you're calling upon certain terms and names, so that, say, foreign entities or discarnate entities listening can't jump in on that frequency, understood, and then manipulate the message, or manipulate a request, or manipulate the response that comes back to you, so on and so forth. So these are the inherent dangers of us within the natural environment. You understand? So the rules are the rules; they can't be changed, and things are going to act according to their nature. Do you understand? If you're a farmer, for example, and you had a very fertile field, do you understand? Whatever you plant in it primarily is going to grow, isn't it? So if you're growing apples to feed, you understand, people, that may be seen a positive thing, yes. But the person can grow poppy seeds and convert it into cocaine, sell it and be mashing up people's lives. Do you understand? The soil is going to do what the soil does. There's no judgment in the soil to say, well, I'm not going to grow poppies because they're going to be used, by reading the intention of the person, they're going to be used to sell cocaine, which is messing up communities and messing up human beings, so on and so forth. So you understand the rules are the rules. Things are going to act according to their nature, and they act in alignment with those rules, whether they're used positively or whether they're used negatively by our perception of the situation. Do you understand? So we have to see that intention and action must match. You can't pretend to be good. You understand? Either you're acting the definition of good, or positively, then you're wanting to do it and doing it for the right reasons, you're judged by that. You understand? And the person who knows whether those things are not matching is you. Yes, the person who understands, or the true judge that knows whether you are behaving with the right type of intentions or the wrong type of intentions. So I'm going there to everybody else's. I'm chanting to everybody else's chanting, or that's supposed to thing that I want to do. But in actuality, you'd rather be on your PlayStation, you understand, thinking about Call of Duty while you're chanting or whatever. Then you're not really, intention and action not match. So one has to learn to balance those two things together. 10. So this is question 10. If granted a Taweb, Dawa, repent cycle, what gateway would you go through to enter your life at the point of mistake or regret? So again, so this was, we were talking about the different ways in which or why a person would come back. One of those was a repent cycle. So if you're granted a repent cycle, so you have ascending masters who are here on earth looking upwards, and you have descending masters outside looking down. So depending on the direction you're going, they're just overseeing your journey in that regard. So if you've got a major regret, we were talking about that before, yeah, major regret could be that, say, sort of A and B fork in the road type decision, and you've gone down route A and it's absolutely the worst decision in the world. You've caused you so much chaos, problems every so often or whatever, years pass, every time, maybe that type of, having a certain time of the year, and when it comes that time of the year, you're remembering it back, and you, for a moment you feel those kind of negative emotions or whatever. That creates a glitch, in your disc, in your narad, you sort of disc, like a broken, like a scratch on the old vinyl records. I know some young people don't know nothing about vinyl, but it creates a scratch on a vinyl record, or like a scratch on a CD, where this gets locked in. It keeps jumping at that particular point. So that's a problem on your disc. So that's one of the reasons, not only, but that's a reason why that mistake needs to be corrected. So if you are granted, it doesn't happen for everybody, if you are granted a repent cycle, then you're born back. So if you went through the multicolored spiral, so that's the correct one, it was black and gold, pale white light, emerald green, and multicolored spiral. So if you went through the pale white light, you're going to be born again in a different body, a new life. You understand? But going through the multicolored spiral will put you back in that same position that you were in before you made the decision. And it would just feel like, A is not the right decision, I need to go down route B. Any action that previously was on your record from the previous choice of A would get wiped away, and then B would become your new reality. You understand? So that's a Taweb Dawar or repent cycle scenario or situation there. Yes, I think somebody did get that correct as the answer. And the last question was, in relation to the mechanisms that are used to record your very existence, match the English definitions to the following Sabaic word. So these Sabaic words were Parsarat, Sajal, Narad, and Bala. So Parsarat, it basically, that is, or definition of that in English is time continuance liner. So that is basically what every part of your existence, since the moment that you were conceived, not born, but when your zero time reference started, right? So from the point of inception, a time continuous liner is created, and that records every aspect of your existence. And as we were speaking about in the last class, that can be needed to transfer that. For example, if we're obviously in this planet, but if we were, for example, making the transition to the twin planet, to Ptah, Nun, or Earth, to Razak or Risk, for example, one of the ways that they could transport you there is by removing your time continuous line or your disk, and then transferring it to another body or entity for you to try. And it would still be you, still be you, because you're a sum total of your experiences. So Jal in Sabaic, it means record, so that would be, you need to match that to record. Narad means dice or disc, so the disc that you're recorded on, that these experiences are recorded on, this time continuous line is on a disc. Sabaic word for that is Narad. Some other cultures, they refer to that as me stones, M.E. a me stone. So that's another way of describing what we're saying here. A record that, a piece of technology that can record knowledge. Understood? Which is what in the story, we ain't doing it in this session, but in the next few sessions, either the next one, the one after, when we go through the symbolism behind the Adam and Eve story, the knowledge, or the tree of knowledge, what was contained in that tree is several different me stones that had knowledge on that you could load into a person, for example, and they would have, I don't know, they could be an expert in the art of sex, for example. Yeah, so you can load different knowledge into individuals. So these are discs, yeah, at this level of technology. And then Ba'h is just simply the word for crystal, which is what the disc would be made out of. You understand? So you know, as the Kadem Matu, the ancient Egyptians, or us as ancient Egyptians, we understood about crystalline technology, which I understood, and the not only crystal's ability to record various different types of frequencies, but also then to extract that knowledge from crystals. So the pyramids, as you see them today, for example, are not in their original form. Yet they were covered in different types of crystal or stone, depending on what its purpose was. So one of its functions was an interdimensions communication device. Understood? And so it would allow us to say in various different ways, as say we could speak to our ancestors, speak to different dimensions, so on and so forth, in one of its purposes. Obviously, the original pyramid is the human nose. You understand? But I say the physical one, which is there, which is obviously connected to the patah, or the third eye. You understand? In terms of us vibrating certain bones in our nose through chanting, opens up our third eye. Do you understand? So this idea, for example, is well formed within our culture, because the pyramids originally didn't have a capstone on top. That capstone is shown as an eye, isn't it? Yeah, but there's no capstone there, or it's not the eye. It's not shown in the pyramid. It's invisible, and that's symbolism to show, as I say, that pyramids, which basically can take electromagnetic energy and convert it into different forms of tachyonic energy, which is the sort of glue of the universe, helps to keep things together, which we do also in our prayer system. We are quantum energy packets. We can convert energy into different forms as supreme melanated beings. That's one of our characteristics there. So, as I say, the pyramids were covered in crystals, and as I say, they are receiving obviously cosmic energy, as we showed you in that diagram, with Anach and Atun. You understand? So that all that cosmic energy and cosmic waves and the received from outside at some point will be stored in these pyramids, and obviously or in crystals. And if you touch them, when we had the power active of psychometry, you could touch those crystals and read that information. Understand? We use crystalline technology today in the computers that we're using now, in your phones, etc. That's what your memory, you understand, is made from. Effectively, that is crystal technology. And even that same technology of crystal reading we use when a baby's in the womb, isn't it? And you go to have an ultrasound, so to speak. That is using sound waves they're using sound waves, for example, to record an image on a crystal, and then fire an electrical pulse through that crystal and causing it then to yield up that energy in order to form an image. Do you understand? So that technology has existed for hundreds of thousands, or should say was there for us in ancient Egypt. It existed for hundreds of thousands of years, obviously gifted to us by our higher ancestors, referred to as the Palatari. So that is the quiz. So any questions?
No questions.
Okay, just show the correct answers there so you can see for yourself. For those who did the quiz. Okay, so let's kick on to what we were focusing on this session today. So the pineal gland. So we can see here on the screen. So we can see here the pineal gland, which is associated with the pine cone. Understood? Yes. Is located. Located obviously in the brain, and I suppose is partnered to some degree with the pituitary gland. Now, the pineal gland is also responsible for releasing hormones that allow melanin production in the human body. Do you understand? So, pineal gland, in one of its aspects, gives us an excess amount of melanin, which is obviously vital, not only to survive in a planet that's 93 million miles away from, it's a powerful sun to us. It may not be powerful in comparison to other suns within our universe, but it's powerful to us, and hence why we have to be shielded from the full energy that the sun is emitting. I think about 1% of the sun's energy is reaching the surface of the planet and the waters, etc., to create the heat necessary to maintain a functional atmosphere for our species and many other species. So that shows you how powerful our sun is. Do you understand? From the magnetosphere onwards, shields us from a lot of those rays. But the pineal gland of a nighttime, you understand what they call night, but in shadow hours, allows us to secrete melanin. So the reason why you probably wouldn't wear shades, and this was for medical reasons, in the daytime, because you wouldn't want to trick the body in thinking that it's shadow time, for example, or night time as they call it, and then you're getting melanin production where you should be having serotonin production. You understand? Another reason as well is that your eyes, the dark, part of your eyes, the pupil, obviously is dark for a reason, because not directly looking into the sun, but it which is damaging. But having sun rays in and around, we absorb that and convert that into energy, which helps to power the body. So they're actually like solar panels in that regard. That's why they're dark in color. The hypothalamus gland is like a mini, using a biblical reference, but it's like a mini version of the Ark of the Covenant. Do you understand? So when stimulated, people experience heightened sense of spirituality. For us, it's like a radio to our ancestors. You understand? The hypothalamus gland. So we have different aspects in our endocrinal glandular system that have obviously physical functions within the human body, but they also have esoteric functions which connect us to higher abilities whilst here in the physical, but also enable higher states of existence in other than the physical and spiritual and etheric realms. Understand? So looking for a side profile of the pineal gland, then this is where it's located. Yeah. Now, so it opens the fact up that, as you see from there, verse 43, back of the medulla oblongata, both mother and father, male and female, need to connect and use the frontal lobe of the brain and the nas hadat pineal gland, like the pine cone to the evergreen. So what this is saying, we've got a 3-in-1 scenario in that regard, because you've got, as I say, a triad principle there where the three things need to be in unison. Do you understand? So left side, right side of the brain, and your pineal gland need to be in alignment with each other. So in terms of operation, so they have different functions, but this is reflected in the 3-in-1 concept, as you see there with the three of our ancestors, you understand, who are also principles Arashtat, Arashtat's a bit of an old pronunciation, but Arashtat, they call Isis, Asar, Osiris, and then the sun, demigod, Hara or Horus they call, is representing that 3-in-1 principle, do you understand, in terms of that side of things. So again, you think about 3-in-1, mother, father, child, for example. So on a scale, you might go 1, 3, 5, for example. The 1 and 3 is representing 1 mother, for example, the 3, the father, and then the harmony between them, do you understand? Is going to be the child, do you understand, at 5, in terms of symbolism, in that context, understood. So, So, and we obviously, as those, we're vibrating at different frequencies, hence the word harmony. You understand? So we're not vibrating in unison, but we are in sync, which is basically this expression of the same note. So different entities expressing the same note, but what we are in harmony, we're expressing different notes, understood, but in the same way, focused on the similar or same outcome. Do you understand? So it's still, in tune, as it were, but it's not the same. So we're each bringing different things to the table, but coming together to work as one, even though we're separate. But as separate, we are arguably dysfunctional. So our natural state should be to come back together again. So a lot of disharmony that's being promoted, I don't know if it's true on the outside, but certainly in a social media context of this sort of war against men and women, and certainly war against black men and black women, going back and forth at each other, which is in opposition to the direction that we need to be going to if we're both, male and female, and our children, going to get to the point where we become supreme beings again. I'm saying a man, for example, cannot achieve his full spirituality or potential unless he's with a woman, because nature transforms the woman first, as we explained in the previous session. She's still in tune with a form of lunar biology, in terms of a menstrual cycle being controlled by the forces of the womb, which is extra terrestrial. Do you understand? It's coming from the heavens. So she's still receiving or connected directly into those natural vibrations. So when the planet, for example, changes, then obviously she will change. So when we go to that higher state of evolution, she will transform first. Do you understand? Because she's still plugged in to the network, so to speak, whereas as males are disconnected. So you transform through your woman. So you transform through your woman. So that's how, as a male, it shows us need to be in the right type of situations, you understand, in terms of partners or relationships, etc. So if you're a man and your partner's not spiritual, you got a problem. You understand? If you're a woman and you've got a partner who's not spiritual, then you got a problem. Do you understand? So these, even themselves, can cause problems. Hence why it says fall in love. Because the power of love in its wrong context can be a barrier to one's elevation, because if they're making decisions because they love their partner, but it could be in opposition to their ascension journey. So this is why picking the right person, or almost sometimes being ruthless on the spiritual path, may mean you have to make decisions that, may be in opposition to what the heart wants, for example, because when the time to transform, when the time it happens, you don't want to be left behind because you love your partner. Well, unless you love your partner that much, it doesn't matter to you. But if it doesn't, then you have to make tough decisions along this road, or as I say, prevention's better than cure. So we need to find ways of picking our soulmates, and certain people who are on the same frequency or in harmony with us, who are on that pathway. So the 3-in-1 you can see here as one of the ways of is that video? Yeah, let's watch this for a second.
Rahubat Yasa, I present to you the Nuwapic greeting known as the sign of the triad is to be performed at various times, such as when you feel the need to show respect when you are in the presence of divine personage. When you view a photo of an ancestor you respect or love, and before and after you present your prayers. To complete the sign of the triad, place your pointer finger above your middle and thumb digits to resemble a triangle. Start from the third eye, Asa, and say, by way of the name of the Father Osiris, Asa. Move down to the left nipple and say, by way of the Virgin Mother, Ashtat, Isis. Then cross over your chest to the right nipple and say, by way of the Blessed Son, Hara, Horus. Then bring your fingers back to Osiris, the third eye, also Asa, then down to the solar plex. The final pose is hands together with a bow.
Okay, so you can see there, for example, this 3-in-1 principle and an aspect, as I say, that allows you to at least show respect to your ancestors so that you can engage in that conversation. Do you understand? As I said earlier, we're praying to our Natharu in order for us to reconnect. They're not in need of our prayers. It's like a spiritual aerobics for us to reconnect, do you understand, into the frequency of Wu-Sabat as appropriate to our species type as their children. But in terms of connecting with our ancestors, we're having a conversation. We're making that connection now so that at the point of transition, not only will they be waiting for us, but more importantly as well, we would recognize them because they're other entities, etc., that could be there to seek to mislead, take advantage of our ignorance, so on and so forth. So, and also we need to ensure that we're vibrating at the appropriate frequency, or have the ability to raise up. Because if we're in the wrong, if we haven't, not spiritual enough, in inverted commas, and our vibrational rate is too low, our ancestors can only come down to a certain level. So you could have a situation where you miss out on that guidance because you have not perfected yourself in this physical realm in order to be at a higher level of vibration in terms of your inner being, in order to make it and survive in the next level of existence. So you think about it, not all babies that come through the womb of a woman make it, you understand, to be born into this world. We have, unfortunately, stillbirth phenomena and other things that can happen where babies die on exit. So in a similar sense, you got to perfect yourself in this life so that when you transition, you need to be of a certain level of vibration, or your spiritual body or your light body needs to be of a certain strength in order for you to make it to exist in the spiritual realm, as well as the fact that, say, your ancestors are not coming down to those lower levels of vibration to meet you. Have to meet them part way at the level they can vibrate to. Those are the rules. So we have to get to a certain level of vibration and strength in order for them to meet us, and obviously them guide us then from the physical or the planet death into, as I say, orientation to be able to survive in what would be said the spiritual world, so to speak. So it's interesting that when you look at this diagram, very helpful diagram for us, That basically, the 3-in-1 principle exists there. Interestingly, we have the deity Amun, the hidden one, which I think we went through before. I'll go with definition for that. So spent energies as thought and sound. So remember in the last class, we were walking you through the riddle of the Sphinx, and we're showing you back the 3 suns. Yeah. You can see again a lot of correlation here. Yeah. So the sun, remember, as it appears to rise. Yeah. And then the sun at noon, and the sun as it appears to set. So the Amun point, remember, is the point. If you overlay it against the life journey, remember the Amun point is the end point, isn't it? Yeah. So Atum Reye, and then Amun Reye, so the ending point. Understood? Yeah. So you overlay it against life journey. Born, that is Atum point. Living, that is the Atun point. Then Amun is the lived point of lived. So Amun is spent energies as thought and sound. So that physical body has expired, isn't it? And then what is left is then left for existence. You understand? And what is left, obviously, is our soul, as some type of experiences. Do you understand? What gets to move on? But if we haven't perfected that, then there's nothing there. There's nothing tangible there enough to move on. Maybe that, as I say, one now has to go back again, and then, perfect yourself, strengthen yourself in order to make it out of this particular degree. But as I say, it's showing you here that the Ptah, all seeing eye, and then solar plexus is also representative of that all seeing eye symbol. Do you understand? That you see there. And we know as well that we do have 2 brains. So we have 2 sides of the brain, but we also have a secondary brain as well, referred to as the abdominal brain. And so you can learn more about that seek out a book called The Science of the Breath. Yeah. From one of our lives in Egypt stores. You want more into that. So the abdominal brain is a secondary brain that we also need to factor in and consider. Now, so that original symbol, which people may interpret as a Hindu symbol, is not a Hindu symbol. It is a Kadem Matu, or ancient Egyptian symbol, now being reimagined or remessaged back to us in this day and time, representing what we refer to as the third eye. Do you understand? Or this Ptah, third eye symbol, tying into the or linked to the pine cone or the pineal gland. Do you understand? Now the here, just showing you an older diagram. So it's showing you here the right eye, yes, represents the sun, and the left eye represents the moon. So when you're looking at a symbol or a particular diagram, for example, yes, one of the things is maybe to pay attention, because different eyes do different messages. Because the sun obviously is the light source, isn't it? Yes, or the emanation of, or emanating particles, which we interpreted as light. And then the moon itself has no light of its own. It gets its light from the sun. So it's reflecting the light of the sun. So if you think about it in the names, for example, they say Tutankhamun, or they say Akhenaten, which is not the proper titles. But if we break it down into the proper pronunciation in tones, and we see Anach en Atun, well, in the name Atun, you can see the position. If we were to overlay the 3 suns, let's just look at this for a second. Not this, they represent what I'm about to say. But if we consider these to be the sun in the morning, sun at noon, and then the sun as it appears to set, the Atun point is here, isn't it? Yeah. And when we saw the diagram, he was receiving rays from that Atun. But in the Pharaoh was the representation of the Nathar on earth, so he would have considered himself that Atun also. Do you understand? But Tut Ankh or Tut Anach Amun, you understand, would have been hidden because his father was in the Atun seat. So he's the hidden light. because his father's occupying the more dominant or the brightest light as the Atun point. And then his name will change, isn't it? So when he now went into the sea, it's Tut Anach or Tut Anach, yeah, Atun. Yeah, so these subtle changes are giving you indication to, okay, or his position has changed, or his father's now taking a back seat. Now he's in the driver's seat. Do you understand? Like when obviously we use the term princess, prince, etc. And then they maybe use king in terms of royalty. So not similar system, but your title changes depending on what position you're occupying. Do you understand? So we have to pay attention to the same system because it's all to deal with natural nature. So we can see here, as I say, Horus or Hara or Ha is moon or left eye. And even if you look in our books here, yeah, we see here that that right eye or the sun represents the overseer, Nathar, yeah, which obviously Asar was. Understand? Yeah, so the overseer. And as you can see on the screen, who that. So who that is the symbol. And left eye representing the moon is called Wuthat. Yeah, Wuthat. Yeah, and is the demigod, which is what we understand Hara was. Hara was the, or representation at least, of the demigod. Part Natharu, part mortal. Now, if you look here, we can see that right eye, or we're looking at it from the right eye perspective. We see a certain type of eye. And then when we look at this eye, we see a more reptilian style eye on the left side of things. You can see, so the demigod is because, remember, the truth about who we are and what was at the center of our zodiac called the Dendora star map was the hippopotamus, who basically showing that we, as a species at least, we are mammals who are also reptilians. Understand? So land-based and also sea-based creatures, hence why we have scales, webs. You understand? And we are in a water environment, even though the planet is falsely called Earth. We're in a water environment, just happen we're not in the sea. We are breathing a more dense, less dense form of water called water vapor. So you can see here that the demigod, so which represents Hara, and we can see that the 20th chromosome as Ha1, human accelerated region, I think we touched on it in last class. It's elongated in human beings. So obviously part Natharu, but obviously part also acclimatized or designed for this water-based environment. And so that's our reptilian nature, which we have to develop and cultivate to be in control of our natures. We are not ruled by our nature. It's a part of who we are. Of course it is. But our mind has control over it all. So we can keep all of our natural tendencies in check if we need to understand, subdue our passions, as they say in Masonry. Any questions?
No questions.
So you can see another depiction of that Ptah or third eye. So we see here the two physical eyes and the Ptah or the third eye at the top, which is an old class. Came to right the wrong, I think it is. Obviously explains the fact that even in the music industry, certain singers, they never promoted because their tones when they sing help to excite free bones in our nasal area. So a lot of singers today, they were promoted to sing falsetto, isn't it? Yeah. So you've got males singing like they've been castrated. You understand? And then you've got even female singers who are singing in falsetto tones. When we look at the word falsetto, it tells you all you need to know. It's got the word false in there. So their natural tones are singing from our diaphragm to get that more bassier, more frequency rich tone, which helps them to vibrate certain bones in the body. Like when a person chants or they perform the chants that we have in Wu-Sabat, for example, and you do it in a consistent basis, which is helping the three tones become one. One of the things that if you're paying attention to yourself, you notice that your voice slightly changes, etc. If you're paying attention or you're directing, even when you're chanting, to where the sound should be going into places that you want to vibrate, for example, like the nasal area, but you're not chanting through your nose, you're chanting from your diaphragm. Understood? But you'll notice that your body is, vibrating more. You understand? Let's say some of that is evident in your voice changing. Some of that is evident when you're speaking. Let's say you can feel that vibration in your nose. When a person, for example, says their own chant, understood? Remember, one of the ways in which you're supposed to do that chant correctly is saying, we're saying, so you're taking that, obviously you've got to use air to take some air in, but you're almost directing that through the mouth to the back of the sort of throat or back of the mouth area. And then as it sort of comes back out again, you understand? You're almost forcing that up to the nasal area. You understand? So that and so it helps to vibrate those bones in the nose, which is helping to open up, obviously, the third eye area. Do you understand? So how you saw those pyramid depicted, you see it with the eye on top. Well, that's us building externally to take advantage of powers external to us and make better use of or full use of the electromagnetic spectrum, powering up vehicles, do you understand, homes and different things, because we're able to make use of this energy. It's abundantly around us, which obviously nowadays we're struggling with energy security if you live in a certain country, or just energy per se in terms of a resource because of how we generate it. But there's an abundance of energy hidden around us, but technologically we're not able to take advantage because they don't know. We did at one time, but now because of who's in power and controlling things, we are not taking advantage of that at this time. But the point is that this is forcing the third eye open in the sound, which is allowing us to connect to different dimensions as part of our natural way of doing things. So that's why communicating with our ancestors was not a foreign thing to us, is because we are etheric and also physical. They are etheric, or if you want to use the word spiritual. We're both. So we can make the connection between the both worlds. We have the ability to do that. No chickens were cut in the process of doing that, etc., etc. Remember, a lot of, even African culture, what many don't realize, they call it and badge it as African, particularly with Pan-Africanist teaching or whatever. Everything African is not African necessarily. It's because we've had a lot of invaders into the continent who brought aspects of their culture with them, and so therefore some cultures have then pivoted towards the invaders' culture. Not necessarily that was all part of their tradition, but because so many thousands and hundreds of years have passed, people don't know the origins, which is why one of our attributes being ontologists, you have to get to the root or the source of where things come from. Understood? Because of those reasons. So you don't have to chop or cut. If you're having to let blood to connect with your ancestors, that's showing you that those people that they're trying, or spirits or entities they're trying to connect with, are of a lower force. They're lower entities. Yeah, you don't have to, as I say, what blood do you have to sacrifice to receive the sun's rays? You don't. Or for clean water, or for fresh air. The planet and the Natharu as the suns are providing this for us automatically as part of the system, as part of servitude to existence. Yeah, so everybody can live healthy. Man comes along puts himself in between that and wants to play Natharu to everybody else so you can control them for whatever economic reasons, to suppress them so that his race can progress in some instances, etc., etc. You understand? But the system provides freely. They say the best thing in life are what? Free. So there's no need for us to cut any blood or whatever the case may be. That's showing you that those forces require that, you understand, in order to sustain themselves. So automatically you know they're 6 ether and below in terms of their vibration. Same as the god of the monotheistic religions who required, you understand, sacrifices, bloodletting, meat eating. That tells you already it's of a lower force. Why there's 66 books in the Bible. Do you understand? For those who know. So they tell everybody else, they're the ones promoting the devil's culture because they're the ones letting the world know about the devil. They promote the devil every day. If they're Muslims, you know, teaching you about Shaitan, and if it's not Christians talking about Satan, they're the ones promoting the devil. Yeah, because more time, other than by somebody doing wrong actions, you wouldn't know about the devil if it wasn't for religion. Na'udhu billahi min ash-shaytan rajim. Every minute they're calling Shaitan's name. So if you don't want to promote him, then don't say his name to give it power, isn't it? They taught you that even in that Harry Potter movie. Yeah, don't say his name to give it power. They're the ones constantly saying his name, keeping his stuff alive, because it's lower forces dealing with those or connecting you with lower forces. Remember, religion is set up to make you food for the gods. It's set up in a way that when you transition, you're not ready. You understand? So that you can become food to feed their 6 ether discarnate entities that want to feed off of your soul. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that's the reality of the situation. So you want to stay away from those forces. Don't listen to what you've been told in the system, because they've set it up in a way where the moment you say ancestors, there's certain word association, connotation, movies that have been made, you understand, that's sitting in there in our subconscious minds, and any rituals that are associated with that are associated with whole heap of negativity, and that may be one tribe or one set of people. That was the way they connected, do you understand? And depending on who they're trying to get in contact with, that may have been appropriate for their culture. But the issue is who was controlling them. You understand? Whereas when you look on our symbols, there's no requirement for that, because our ancestors are powerful, all powerful. Understood? As we are all powerful in our right state. And so therefore, nature shares power. It abundantly does so. You understand? It's just a case of us having the ability to tap in. So that's the patah, or the divine symbol with the 3 eyes there. I'm not sure why I put this up. Okay. On that side. Any questions?
No questions.
What did I put this up there now? So this is a migration map of us, as I say, out when we're our Natharu set up, a base on what would be Antarctica today, and then dropped those seeds into the oceans by way of the dolphin. And then so we were in the waters or the seas as mer people, understand? So mer men and mer people, and mer, even in actuality, does tie into that word mir, which is one of the ways of it's a way of describing the pyramids. It's a mirat, so the old word for pyramids. Yeah, so mer is also tying back into that 3rd eye. Do you understand? Of our existence. So I'm not going to go through this in those details. This is just showing about a migration map where the genes have been intercepted along the way by different groups of extraterrestrials, which has then led to various different races or planetary nations, is another way to say that, here on this planet. Do you understand? So we don't have the same origin, which is why we have different spiritual practices, because your what they call religion, do you understand, should tie into your genes, because it's leading you to connect you to your ancestry. So I can't take on somebody else's religious practices if it's not going to help me connect to my ancestors. It's a different telephone number, it's a different network, it's a different router. Do you understand? And our melanin content is one of the ways in which it tells you how it tells you the vibrational rate and how much power is in that rate based on the color. Do you understand? So if you think about red is the slowest vibration in the electromagnetic spectrum, because these are particles move through darkness at a certain speed, and blue happens to be the fastest. Do you understand? So we're at the upper range in terms of our melanin, vibrating across the whole of the spectrum. So as those energies slow down in vibration, the color that they manifest to denotes how much power is within that vibration. So a lack of color would represent low vibration, you understand, or low power in the vibration, whereas an abundance of it would then represent a higher level of vibration or more energy within it, as you see with coal, for example, which has lots of energy stored within it, and then when it's burned, do you understand, and the energy is dissipated from it, it turns into ash, which there is a lack of color in it. Do you understand? In that regard, same like with coal transforming into a diamond over many years. Yes, the energy is being dissipated. Now it may be hard in terms of texture, do you understand? But obviously, it can go in, if I use that word loosely, upwards or higher vibration, you become less dense. Lower vibration, you become more dense. Hence, when you look at water, for example, it's more dense as ice. Then when you add heat to it and so you speed up the molecules, it turns to water and then turns into steam, which is less dense, but it's more powerful. Do you understand? Yeah. So in that regard, so yeah, I can't remember I put this up directly, but yeah, this is just showing different types of vibration. Okay, so you understand about the 3-in-1, and there are many types of. There's 4-in-1. Do you understand anything about the seasons? There could be 5-in-1, 6-in-1, 7-in-1. So these are different systems, yeah, to help you understand that they appear separate in the light world, but in actuality they're not. So the sun, we know, does not move into 4 different positions, as Atum, Atun, Amun, and Anun. Doesn't move into 4 different positions. The sun does not move in terms of direction. It does spin on its own axis, but it doesn't move. So the symbolism is alluding into the world of things that we can't see. That's how we use symbolism. Yet we know that symbols represent a hidden meaning. But for us here, obviously trapped almost in a sense and vibrating, at least, or perceived to be vibrating in one aspect of this electromagnetic spectrum, the symbols are helping to widen in a symbolic but also factual way of what is taking place in the darkness or the world that we cannot see. Do you understand? Now, we showed an image on our Facebook page of a Anunnaki, you understand, wearing a wristwatch and holding a pine cone at the same time. So he was asking, well, what's the difference? What is the link between wristwatches and time? And so this is the answer to that question. So the 3-in-1, as we see, and we've taught this so many times in this class, if you've been attending, but if you're new. So we see here the 3 new bowls. Yeah? And in the context of existence, the 3 are inseparable: space, matter, and time. You cannot have one without the other. Understood? So that 3 is represented, that is a 3-in-1 principle or situation there. These new, or some refer to them as nun bowls. Understood? Now, it says you must understand, listen, 235 from Lotus of Life, actual fact. It says you must understand the 3-in-1. Not, you understand, must is saying that you need to know this. Yeah? You must say the 3-in-1, that is you. Then, now, then. So then, now, then is showing us there that basically when we're looking at past, present, and future, and now in this context, space, matter, and time. So time is not, time is, yeah, but you know things by way of the time. Yeah, so time is not this or that, but it is. But you know things by way of the time. But in order to do that, you have to have space and you have to have matter. And then things grow. And so the fact that they grow by way of the time, you're able to determine that a thing was once this, but now it's something else, understood? But what it was is still there. Do you understand? So you think about us expanding, because certain times, for example, when you read certain books and you hear our ancestors or the Natharu by way of the master teacher speaking about us in different ways. For example, in Hotep in chapter 1, they speak about the single cell amoeba, and they talk about it in the context of that being a human being. Now, obviously, that is not the trillions of years of evolution that has come from that point to where we are now in this complex life form with, you know, trillions of transactions that take place every sort of waking moment in unison, in harmony with each other, so that we can function as human beings. We were once a single-celled life form. Do you understand? Yeah, very simple. But they're referring to that as us as human beings. Now, prior to you, if you're not a Sabian, but prior to you reading these books or prior to you reading this information, you would not have seen yourself as that. You would see that as something else. But way down in our DNA, that is still there. Now, it's more sophisticated representation of that is the sperm and the ovum, but that's part of our past as a species. So we have a start date as a species, but you have a start date also as an individual. Do you understand? But within you having that start date, you sit within a start date for us as a species. Do you understand? This is why you get those dates certainly in the holy tablets of 76 trillion years, 46 trillion, the birth of the first cell, etc. So we have a species start date. So the point is that when you look at then, you can have multiple thens of the past, or what we would call the past. So you at 5, you at 3, you at whatever, 7, you at 11. Those are multiple thens, and by way of events, not so much that I'm 11 years old or I'm this or whatever. Do you understand? But more so the events that take place within that space and within that period. But you refer to that as then as of the past. Now, you can have multiple thens of the future, yeah, which haven't quite happened yet from a perception point of view. They've not arrived yet, but they're out there. But all of that is part of now. So within now, you have thens of the past and thens of the future, all part of this thing referred to as now. So even though it's free, so past, present, and future appear separate, but they're really one. Do you understand? Yeah. And so, because tomorrow, what's the difference between tomorrow and today? Well, we say, okay, when it gets to 12 o'clock, what changes? It's because the way that we've decided in this society, at least, to record time is that when the clock so-called goes past a certain number, i.e. 12 o'clock, midnight, then we're saying, well, that means that's tomorrow. But in nature, what has changed? What has changed outside of us calling it something different? What has changed? Well, nothing really. It's just part of a process of expansion. Yeah. So how we label it, it has an elusive element. But the interesting thing for us is that, and the mastery of not only the master teacher but the Natharu is that within that symbolism is clues to what is taking place. It's giving you greater insight of how the universe into the order of the other verses works and take place. So here in these verses, you get different types of 3-in-1 type scenario. So one the same, 236, as your soul, body and spirit, all 3-in-1. Yeah, 237, birth, growth, death, all three are the same. 238, so in fact, there are the same place and time. 239, up, here, down is the same. 240, the secret of 3 as 1 and the same. So, as I say, this is important for us to understand the kind of how that symbolism sits and works and alludes to the reality. Remember as well, given that we're talking about the sort of third eye, it's our perception of it as well, of how we're looking at things. So remember, we showed you the image, or a peacock. Probably should have put the image up. Let me see if I can find it. It's not take too long. If I can't, then we'll just carry on talking. Oops. I can't find the image I'm looking for that I want to use for this. Anyway, the point is that if you were to look at image, let's say any kind of photo, even here, let's go back. Even here, we're seeing here that we've got a circular image here. Now, from a certain perspective, obviously, that looks like a circle, you understand, because of the way it's shaped. But if we zoomed in, you understand, a lot further, and that line, let's say, it appears relatively smooth. I think you can see a little bit of degradation of the line, but it appears relatively smooth. But depending on how deep you sort of go into it, I mean, you sort of get the impression, okay, well, this is, you can see it's dark and light spots, you understand? And if you went further into it, you would see actually there's no circular line at all. It's actually many different black and white squares which give the illusion of a circular line. The point is that being made here is depending on your perspective. A picture will look like a picture like we can see here. You go deeper, you're going to see that the same thing is just a conglomeration of white and black squares. You understand? You go even deeper behind the matrix of it. Actually, it's just a combination of zeros and ones. You understand? In the binary system. Do you understand? You look at the sort of programming. So depending on where you're looking at it from, your perception of the same thing can be different. Do you understand? Hence, we're saying here, oh, well, these are all one, you understand, and the same, because it's the perspective of where you're looking at it from. So, and in the context of this, different planes of existence would mean that same you understand, sometimes can have a different sheath, or how you are interpreted, understood, will have a certain classification. You understand? So, for example, when you die and you shed the physical body, understood? Well, you're no longer that body, but you're still you. Yeah, if you're alive and the sum total of your experiences. But on the spiritual plane, you don't have a physical body, for example. You understand? You have a spiritual body. So that's still you, understood, but it's different. But then when you were in the physical, that was referred to as you, your physical body. That was referred to as you. And it was you, you understand? But, you understand, it was just a different aspect of self, do you understand? And so in this similar context, things can have different titles, but they're the same thing, or they're the aspect of the same thing, and this is what they're seeking, or this is what we're seeking to convey here. Hence why those three symbols are the same, but they're different in the symbolism. Yeah, they're different, but they're the same. Okay, so secrets of the 3 in 1. Right, so 2, 3, 1. It says these are important. We're going back, so okay, 2, 3, 1. We're going back. So yeah, this is helping us to understand this 3 in 1 even again. Yeah, so these are important because the link between the mental, I should say, and your khatat body is tightly bound when held in your hands and with the function of the left and right hemisphere of the brain. 2, 1, 4. Harmonizing of the body by these in the right way, and the tones of A flat, A major, and A sharp activates your divine link. 2, 1, 5. Female is first, A sharp. The female's voice is to the right of middle C. And the male is first, A flat, male voice to the left of middle C. Imperfections, they are A major, male in a lower octave. Understand? So again, we were talking earlier about the left and right hand sides of the brain, and the tone of the human body to help it realign itself is A major. Now in the book, in the tones Parteract, for example, the master teacher explains that the best instrument to help with that realigning in this day and time, at least, is the harmonium from what's left. So a wind instrument that you can use to create these tonations. So A is the body. So the body is helping really the body to tune into natural nature's frequency, and specifically for us, it's the frequency of Wu-Sabat. You understand? So that tone can really help to force people to get back into their right shape. You understand? That optimizes them for their transformation journey. Because a person who's overweight, for example, it can change the way your voice sounds, which can affect your pronunciation. And then when it comes to saying certain tones that may activate various different forces in nature, that might not work for the individual because their vibration or their tone is off, because the temple that is resonating that sound is not in the right shape for that person. Same way if a person is underweight, it can be the same thing. Your tone is not right. So if we're at our right or optimum weight for us, then clearly it means that internally, or how our body is resonating that frequency, it's going to be in the correct tone. It's not going to be off. You understand? So we can see here in the state of harmony that male, understand, represented, we're talking about here that 135 female sharps, male the flats, and then the child in the context of that example at least would be the harmony between the two. Do you understand? Yeah, as that major tone. Do you understand? So, left and right hand sides of the brain. So 216, as a person's two eyes of sight become linked to the one beyond physical sight, and that's Ghadat, pineal gland, open the Patar, divine third eye, the all-seeing eye. So important there to distinguish, yes, the fact that the pineal gland is not the third eye. Understand? It opens up the third eye. It is not itself, in of itself, the third eye. Understand? 217. The person begins to use more of their what? The Mach, brain activity, able to see interdimensionally worlds beyond Tapalat worlds. 218. And that opens you up to time traveling clockwise, to future, counterclockwise to past, or to bend space to travel long distances within a moment of Wakut time, or then now then. 24 billion miles per moment, the speed of Fakar thought. So, interestingly enough, let me just do something. I'm trying to remember where I was. Can you see this here word? Can you see tapal? So in Lotus of Life, you see that it's translated as world. Do you understand? Now you see it's the word for prayers. Yeah, so tapal, you understand, the or is the equivalent of the er, and then the at is the pluralization of it. Yeah, so we're saying tapal or at, it's prayers. You understand? Like the er, like a descriptive verb. You understand? So here the word tapal is now the word for prayer. But in what we were just looking at, let's see where it was, where we were at. You can see it means tapala is words, isn't it? Yeah, world. So this is showing you again that our prayer system, or us activating, remember that we were talking about the pyramids earlier, and that the original pyramid being your nose, and even the part of Shutat prayer system, remember we explained this before, that even that prayer system, one of its other self elements of doing it was it aligned the endocrinal glands into a singular alignment, and it would enable you to open up a portal where your great grandmother who's passed or whatever could step through that portal and you could have a conversation with them. You understand? So the reality is that it's showing you here that worlds, when we were talking about the makeup of the universe earlier in the quiz, that the makeup of the universe is multi-dimensional, it's multi-tonal, and us vibrating across the whole of the 9 ether range or spectrum means that we can jump between these worlds, or had the ability to, at will, or even with help and support, you understand, using instruments that were in and around us. So now you're seeing some of the hidden science behind why we're doing our spirituality. It's not worship of a deity. Do you understand? It is basically they're helping you to perfect yourself by using them as a primary point of focus, while at the same time humbling yourself Yes, so that you don't, when you obtain these powers, one, are you worthy? And then secondly, that you don't go out there tripping, so to speak. Do you understand? They don't create a monster that's basically just going to tear up this kind of physical or peaceful environment. Do you understand? Like a person who is well skilled in a martial art, for example, or who maybe has gone for a discipline of boxing, if they're raised right, they're not going out there on a Saturday night, let me test my abilities in front of the club to impress women and bucking up people. Do you understand? They're more so living a more disciplined life in a lot of instances of peace, because if you mess with them, they could kill you just with their bare hands. So once you understand the power, you're not out here abusing it. You understand? So why the journey takes a certain, you know what I mean? It's framed a certain way, and why one has to earn, the powers, because once you have it, you have it. You understand in that regard? So the point is that the link between that interdimensional communication and prayer, you can see, I mean, how detailed not in their ancestors are, but listen, Ba'h B'ah Yaanuwn, look, listen, just by showing you even those links is showing you every aspect of your doctrine. You understand what I'm saying? It's pinpointed to train you or teach you to one thing, or why one thing is linked to something else, all for a very specific reason. Understood? Yeah, for those who can see. So here it's showing us that the divine eye, you understand, and it's linked to the pineal gland, is one of the secrets for us being able to travel through time. And if you think about it, when you use your own body of experience, you instantaneously, for example, can remember, because of the three-dimensional holographic brain, means that a smell, you understand, taste, a certain sound, certain visuals can take you back into the past instantaneously, isn't it? It can trigger, we know, obviously those memories are stored like undeveloped negatives, and it can be triggered where we then develop those negatives instantaneously. Do you understand? Where you can go back and, depending on the quality of the memory, it can almost feel like you're back there. Do you understand? Or you can remember, as they say, remember the time in that song. You can remember the time when X happened or this happened or whatever. And you're in that moment, at least you're back there living it as part of your experience. But we don't think of that as time travel. But we have traveled back in time, even if it's our own thoughts and memories. You understand? Now, how we're governed by time here, is specifically linked to the fact that, or at least we have put that in our perception, that basically it's linked to us, or this planet, as I say, moving in an orbital fashion around the sun, as well as how many times it rotates on its own axis. Do you understand? Which we refer to as a day, even though you're not facing the sun fully for a period of a day. Do you understand? But we refer to it as a day, and we say 24 hours, even though it's slightly less than that. 23 hours, 56 minutes, 6 seconds. But we say, well, okay, that's a day. So because our mind is tied into that, our perception is, isn't it, we're getting older. How many times a planet goes around the sun and we say, oh, well, that's a year, based on the rotational movement of the planets, we then say, okay, well, that's a year. So we feel older because that's a year. You understand? Because our perception is tied in to the way we've been taught how to measure time in the country pretty much that we live within. There's an internal clock that's also working, which is really the thing that's aging us, is the reduction of our telomeres. I say that to say, yeah, the characteristics of you becoming old, you understand, you've associated with, or we have associated, not you, but we have associated with certain deteriorations within the human condition. So we might associate grey hair, for example, with getting old. We may associate deteriorated physical performance with getting old. We may associate deteriorated memory with getting old. But the point is, if you fix those things, then what? So let's say somebody comes along and can fix those things and restore them back. Then what does old mean in those contexts? So if you never had grey hair, what does old mean? Instead, if your strength and your ability to resist gravity, because that's what's taking place, our ability to resist gravity gets less. So the magnetized power within our blood, for example, is reducing over time. So our ability to resist, we're getting less. In the same, breasts start sagging, our skin starts sagging, and obviously within our, if you're darker skinned, then us as Nagaru, those signs don't show, depending on how you've lived life, but those signs don't show on us as much as they show in other races. So the point is, if these signs are not there, then what does old and age mean in that context? Do you understand? So a certain aspect of it, you understand, is yet linked in to how we interpret and perceive the world around us. Do you understand? And how we're locked in to this environment almost as well by perception. Do you understand? And how time has been linked to this seemingly deterioration. You understand? But if you think about it, if you was on a spaceship, or let's say let's keep it a bit more grounded, but let's say you're on a space shuttle that is able to make it into actual outer space, because a lot of the satellites and space shuttles are not actually in outer space, because you can be an astronaut, for example, in America, once you're 55 miles above the surface of the planet. You understand? So once you're 55, that is a definition of an astronaut, above that range, which does not take you into outer space. Do you understand? It's still within the spheres of the planet at that range. I'll let you do your own research to check that out. However, the planet is rotating at around about 1,024 miles per hour. Understood? Yes? You now are in a spaceship outside of the planet Earth. So that spinning of the planet, where it changes from night to day, which your circadian rhythm, let's say, would be tied into that. Well, you're not on the planet Earth, so you don't know what dark and, you understand? There's no night and day where you're at. So that's not going to be the attributes that then trigger your systems. So now you're living by a different system because you're outside of the spheres of the planet. Now, technically speaking, if now you traveled at double the speed in that spaceship, so you're traveling at, this planet is moving at 1,024 miles per hour, understand the speed of it circulating. You now are going, let's say, at 2,048 miles per hour. When you come back to the planet, yes, you're going to be younger than when you left. Yeah? When you come back to the planet, because you're moving at a different speed, you're moving at a faster speed than the planet, because the planet Remember, a day to us, i.e. 24 hours in a day, is based upon 1,024 miles per hour rotational rate. Do you understand? So if you go faster and you're outside that, when you come back, your body will feel, well, it won't feel, but you will be younger than when you left. So let me say it a different way. If you, in your sat nav, for example, yeah, if you got to travel, if you're traveling from point A to B, yes, and you're traveling from point A to B, yeah, and you travel at 70 miles an hour, yeah, and the distance from point A to B is 70 miles, you are going to be there in how much time? They travel 70 miles at 70 miles per hour. You're going to arrive at point A. From point A to B, you arrive in 1 hour, correct? Right. Now, but if I travel at 140 miles an hour from point A to B, 70 miles, when would I arrive? I'm going to arrive there in half the time, correct? So I've bent time in that regard. I've bent time. By traveling faster, I've bent time. Yeah, for the same event. So between the same two events, my starting point from A and my ending point at B, I've bent time between them by increasing my speed. Do you understand? And you can travel so fast, i.e. beyond the speed of light, where time itself, or your perception time, or time itself on where you are, can even go in the reverse direction. Which, when we think about here, yes, the speed of thought compared to the speed of light, yes, I mean, the speed distance is exponentially faster, isn't it? You understand? So speed of light is what, 186,272 miles per second. Do you understand? Yeah. Well, this is 24 billion miles per moment, the speed of thought. Which is why via this medium, through your memory banks, you're able to travel back in time, and it's nothing to you, innit? It's not even, you didn't even know you were even doing it. That's how natural and how easy and instantaneous that is and feels. Do you understand? But here, what this is explained to us, well, how does that take place now? Not just in your own mind, but outside of the body. Yeah, Tawatak Hara Imhababia. I can see your prompts, yeah? So, it says what? 2:19. So this is just us now. This is what the book's explaining. This is just us now with our what? Our left, right side of our brain, our pineal gland, and our third eye hooked up properly, working harmoniously together. Just in us as a being. Yeah, this is one of the results. So it says, you become a time traveler first, mentally or mentally. Yeah? Then physically. Listen what he's saying here. Mentally. Yeah, so from that female origin, mentally first or mentally, then physically. So once that hookup, so we can't understate the importance of being able to travel back in time in our own memories. That's the starting point of who we are. Or, not who we are. Let's say it this way. A starting point of trained abilities, untapped potential in relation to who we are. So you become a time traveler first when we're hooked up properly mentally. Happen to us mentally, then physically. And this is how it's achieved physically. 220. As etheric energy transformed inside outward, the ether journey. So etheric body, etheric being, soul within, but now we're going to be reversed out, isn't it? So energy being first, and internally some of those physical characteristics makes it. So we're turning ourselves inside out, you understand, in that context. Now, this is just a breakdown, I think, of us understanding about time. I won't cover this for the moment. We'll carry on. So we'll take us away from where we are. So this diagram shows that 3 in 1. You understand? Present, now, here, same as future, then there, same as past, then there. Yeah, so you're expanding out from a single point, but this is all now. And in certain first terms of rotation, you understand? Future is clockwise rotation, you understand? So again, you think about the direction, because it can sound strange, isn't it? I was just saying it on paper. But actually, when you look at it physically, as we just explained, the planet is turning in a certain direction. Yes, spinning in a certain direction. The orbit is also in a certain direction. Those things are associated with future. Correct? What we're calling tomorrow, the planet is turning in a certain direction, but we just haven't reached that point yet. You understand? But that's not time in the direction. That's the actual action of what is happening. Do you understand? Within time or by way of the time. Do you understand? So that is why future can be clockwise. And why, for example, past would be then counterclockwise. Because it's interesting to think about that, isn't it? If you go faster, you come back younger. But then what would happen if everything started to reverse, all these actions? Or what would happen if you was on a planet where those directional changes were reversed? Would you go then from old to young? Based on our makeup? Yeah, so what Wu-Sabat is doing for us, it's causing us to have to explain in terms of the details. Well, what do we mean by we're saying we're getting old? What do we mean, do you understand, when we're saying we're young? And then in what context is that? Because we're saying old, okay, I'm an old man or old woman in this context, but actually, aren't you then, you know what I mean, ready to become a child in the next context? When you understand, you come out of this physical. And it's interesting, isn't it? When we go through the cycle, we needed to be looked after when we were babies because we couldn't do it for ourselves. And then we go through this cycle. But by the time we get to the end, depending on level of independence, we need to be looked after in certain instances or need support when we're older. Maybe a different type of support. You understand? Like, how'd you use a computer? How'd you get onto the internet? You understand? Different things. But it's still support needed. Older. So even in our old cycle, we've gone back to how we started. Do you understand? I think we even explained that. Even biologically, we start off neutral gender. You understand? Then we express certain gender, male, female, or some people, a few are hermaphrodites or hermaphrodites. You understand? And then as we get older, it becomes more neutral again because a male's testosterone levels start to reduce, so he's becoming more female. That's one of the things that makes a female is a lack of testosterone. You understand? So the male's testosterone levels reduce, and in females, your estrogen levels start to reduce. Do you understand? So the estrogen level makes a woman more female. Less testosterone, would make a person more female. So more testosterone makes a person more male. less estrogen would make a person more male. So as those levels start to balance out, then what are you? Yes, you are still a man and a woman, but you're a more balanced being, you're more neutral gender, which is how we started in the first place. And it's actually how our species started. So all of these things, us as a species, us as individuals, but then us as a group, you understand? We're going through these same changes. Yeah, and they allude to the fact that they're from a certain perception that Nathara are saying to us, but they're just one the same. Because as a species, we've got certain characteristics. As individuals, we're going through those same journey characteristics that were informed by the species journey. Do you understand? So I don't know if it's as clear as it is in my mind and where we're expressing it. If it's not, then please question further. Now, it says, we're finishing that 10 minutes. So 241 says you're a three-dimensional being ready to experience the fourth you or the etheric you. So what is 3 dimensions? Well, 3 dimensions we would say is what? Length is one, yes. Width is another. And then depth or height is another, yes. So those are 3 dimensions. So the 4th dimension is time. Do you understand? 4th dimension is time. And it's actually one of the tasks that out of Project 24, where they sent 12 etheric beings here from Orion, male, where male DNA comes from, and 12 etheric beings from Sirius star constellation, where female DNA comes from, overstood, excuse me. Yeah, and we were set, or our species was set as the children of the Nathar, 24 tasks that we were supposed to accomplish within this 24,000, within the last 24,000 year cycle, and we failed because of the distractions and disruptions and preventions and hindrance of the Mukasu, the Caucasian race amongst us. So we were supposed to have mastered time travel based on our abilities, based on our natural abilities that we have been endowed with. Part of those being Ha1, yeah, which is an engineered, demonstrates or shows the process of engineering there, because it's extended in human beings versus animals, and it's one of the reasons why we're more intelligent than most animals on the planet, even though we are an animal ourselves physically, as we're breathing. You understand? The fact of the matter is that we have extra abilities, and those abilities have been programmed and placed within our DNA, in our genes. Now, it says 9 to 9th power of 9, or 999 over powers calculations in math. 243. Your third eye, or the pineal gland in the center of your brain between the two halves, is your gateway. Once you learn how to activate it, it produces your melatonin, the master secret, which was the secret of your divine being. So here we see, you understand, yeah, that the master secret is what? Melatonin. So we've got actual facts and master secrets, correct? And this is before there was master secrets. This book was written before that time and taught to women directly before it was even taught to males. But it's telling you that the master secret, Zan, was melatonin, or our levels of melatonin. And what is the word secret? Secret is nothing but the word secrete, isn't it? The word secrete and the word secret are very similar, isn't it? And our pineal gland, as it's explained there, is secreting melatonin. But obviously, its secret, or how to unlock its ability to give up that which it is holding to enable the transformation of our being, or for our pineal gland to be secreting the levels of melatonin Understood? That would transform us from mortals back into divinity again. Obviously, that there's a secret clearly, heavily within that. Understood? So we'll finish on this slide and we'll continue in the next session. So it says, 244, the master of time is the pineal gland. Yeah? The Hazkoaz, pine cone, pine from Latin pinus, an evergreen tree with cones and needle-shaped leaves. So this is interesting because remember, we were just having a discussion earlier about these characteristics of what we're showing about age. And if you remove these kind of characteristics, doesn't that really transform our perception of what we're calling age or time or old? Because if you never go through that decay, then what is it then? How are you defining old? And in the next session, not probably in this one, we'll show you that certain even time systems are not sensitive enough to even measure all aspects of our existence. Because you will say, for example, that I'm 30 years old. I am, 40 years old. I'm 50 years old. But what happens from 0 to 1? How old are you then? In years. It's not calculated, is it? What? So at 0, what's your calculation? So the time there's a problem with it. Because I use 0 years. You should be, technically. You should be 0 years. But you don't say that. How old is the person? Oh, I'm 0. You understand? So we're not calculating, or they're not calculating the way they've taught us. They're not calculating that time. Because we don't say, how old is your son? No, he's 0. He's 0 years. Yeah, and actually, if you think about even with months, yeah, so on that time system, we will say, okay, you're 1 at the end of the period. Correct? But yet, when it's the month from the start of the period. So it becomes January on the 1st of January. It doesn't become January at the end of January. But we become logged as 1 year at the end of the period, not at the start of the period. So even in the time recording, it's confusing. But yet want to purport that it's accurate. I'll leave you to think on that one. So the point is that the pine cone from the evergreen tree doesn't have the degradation, because the pine green, the evergreen stays evergreen throughout the seasons. Yeah, which alludes back to a time, you understand, when our genes were purer, when our genes were stronger, where we were not subject to the seasons the way we are now. You understand? Where you get changes in the way, the amount of energy that's being emitted in the environment, where we go from spring, summer, you understand? Spring to summer, autumn to winter. You understand? And if you look at the trees that are subject to those changes, they go through a number of changes. Where this evergreen tree is superior to that because it stays the same all the way throughout. It's above seasons. You understand? So if you understand, to be outside of time, or the way time is being recorded, yeah, we have to have an ability to take ourselves out of said environment, to have control of it. understand? And how we use it. Yeah, as we gave an example with the shuttle being outside the environment. But I mean, what this is showing us is this a matter of perception? Have we been tricked into being old? Based on belief. Now, I'm not saying we're not getting old. We are obviously getting old. But the characteristics that make a person old, scientific technology, even now, as the master predicted, is reversing those characteristics. So what does time mean in that context is the point that we're making. It says pineal body, Latin pina, pine cone, a small cone shaped in the body and the brain that produces a hormone. On this subject, there is much more to know at the right time to the right ones only. Ones of you only. Interesting. Yeah? So there's a lot more secrets in the master's secret. Yeah, as it's being given to there. So it says, note the Anunnaki always hold up a pine cone. Yeah, which... yeah, we were showing you with the image of this individual being, not the only one in the Anunnaki depictions, who's wearing a wristwatch. Yeah? But we think that's modern. You understand? We think that's a modern invention. And interesting enough, that obviously in terms of information, religion is not applicable really in these modern times, you understand, where we live, because of the amount of knowledge, information that's there. But if you think about it, part of the problem, in one sense, with those who are controlling the environment by their version of the way they're recording time, is because the word modern ties into the word mode. Yes, and so they've got people vibrating in one mode or one frequency, which is in the image and after the likeness of the beast. Do you understand? And not being self, as would be natural. Tigers are not trying to be like lions. Lions are not trying to be like panthers, but they're all part of the same species. Do you understand? But if I can fool you, Nagaru, the power source, and get you to direct your soul energy and power and force and labor to support my, or mankind's, a kind of man's liberty, then because that's my nature to live or subsist off of those who are stronger or more powerful than me, then mode works for me. Getting everybody on the same vibration, getting everybody to live in my image works for me. But it doesn't work for me as in him, but it doesn't work for me as in us. You understand? So their modern way of doing things was obviously to remove, isn't it, the ancient ways, re-establish themselves as the authority, as the master explained. Those who are the authors become the authority and decide what is not authentic. So whatever the ancient ones are doing, we're going to do the complete reverse. You understand? So if they wrote right to left, we're going to write left to right. You understand? We're going to keep on a lower or our vibration and not everybody else's. Now a being's coming along who's opening up the way again to the whole of the electromagnetic spectrum. Hence we say all, isn't it? We start off by saying I am in the love of all. We're not interested in mode in that context of modern. So modern for us is in the reverse direction, because we were more technologically advanced in terms of our liberty in the past, therefore have to be what? Reminded yeah, travel back in time, travel back in mind, back to the past, and then bring it now back into the future, into the present, to take control of our future once again. So we've hit that marker now. So we'll continue this interesting conversation. I think it's a nice part to end, and we'll delve more into the third eye and perception. But you can see now why these two things are linked. So this individual obviously has the power to direct that third eye energy in a certain direction, has control of it. You understand? And well, why would you wear a wristwatch? Well, you understand, you might want to make sure, in order to, if I change or travel or move between, you understand, dimensions, or move between certain points in time, I might need to remember where my fixed point is. You understand? So I don't get confused or lost. That's a device that would do that, wouldn't it? So it's interesting, as I say, that what was thought to be modern existed in the past. And that somebody who's in control right now is simply copying things from the past and then pretending as if it's new. But that's their nature, but not our nature. Any questions before we close out?
No questions.
None at all. Okay, so we've been very quiet today. So I trust that it's all understood. There's no questions. If not, feel free to email us in the chat details that are given in the email for those you register with Zoom. All Eyes on Egypt, Midlands. All Eyes on Egypt, MN at AOL.com. If not, we are back in 2 weeks' time. The date of which will be the 7th of August, and then again on the 21st to continue part 4 of this very interesting set of classes. So if there's nothing else, everybody take care. Enjoy the heat wave that's taking place in the UK, and if it's all around the world, then do what you need to do to take advantage of that. Seems it's scaring a lot of people. I think we were supposed to take vitamin C on a daily basis, over 500 milligrams of that per day, which also helps to control one's temperature. So that was an old jewel that was given to us by the master. So probably something to implement if you haven't started already. Okay, then. So we will see you in 2 weeks' time for another Wu-Sabat Outformation class. Take care, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Wadu.